Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
And hello, Cricket Badgers around the world. Very good to see you again. We are back with another edition of the Cricket Badger podcast. You can say, I'll say hello to him very quickly before I give you some news. Tim Wigmore, you are the guest today. Come on to talk about your book. Very good to have you on the Cricket Badger podcast today. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, enjoying the heat and here to talk about this and obviously plug it very, very famously.
Taking him 3 seconds to get it on the screen. Beautiful. It's like a pro. Just before we get into Tim's chat, I am delighted to say we've got a new sponsor of the Cricket Badger podcast, CRICKETFROG. So if you are traveling to cricket by train, if you're traveling anywhere by train, CRICKETFROG can help you out with the tickets. They can help you out with all sorts of different things when it comes to booking your train, changing your trains. And if you quote, now let me get this right, CRICKETFROG, when you book, then you get £5 off. And you can also, I think there's a mechanism for bidding to get upgraded to first class as well. So you can live the life of luxury, and who doesn't want to do that? So CRICKETFROG.com, new sponsor of the Cricket Badger podcast. Thank you to them. And download the app and book away your tickets. If you're traveling around the counties and what have you, trains are usually quite a common way of doing it. CRICKETFROG.com can help you out. Anyway, back to Tim, and it's good to see you. I was just asking you before we came on live whether we'd actually met, because I've read your stuff. I think you're aware of me, but we don't think our paths have ever crossed, have they?
No, it's one of those weird things in the kind of cricketish bubble where you feel very familiar with each other, but you're actually, we can walk past each other in the streets and never have known, but here we are now.
Yeah, well, now I'll be able to say hello to you. Hello, Tim. Anyway, hello. Test Cricket, A History by Tim Wigmore is available in all good places and bad places and Amazon and all the rest of it. I mean, you want it sold wherever you can, I guess. One of the first lines in the book, Tim, is Test cricket is the most brutal game. And it's also described as the enemy of romance. Basically, that kind of suggests that it is tough. It is a test. It is a battle. It is a proper examination of a cricketer's technique, etc., stamina, their mental fortitude. But it also suggests that the best team wins.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to sort of think about some of the things we generally love about Test cricket. You know, the second chance, which I guess has some romance to it. Obviously, the fact you have 4 innings, 2 innings each, just the sheer length of the games, all part of its uniqueness, its charm. But actually, I was trying to, taking a step back, what does this mean for the game in terms of who wins and who loses? And actually, of course, this means, in football, we all know you can be, the away team, especially, you can have 10 men behind the ball. You get then you get a lucky deflection or a, set piece goal, whatever. You win 1-0, and you've kind of semi-fluked it. You can't fluke a Test match win. It is so difficult. Even talking about it is difficult, in fact. And I suppose actually we do see lots of. I think when Ireland played England a few years ago, 2019, when Ireland were actually bowling it out for 80. It's an amazing game where you can bowl a team out for 85, and I think Ireland at that point they were still the underdogs on the betting market, and ended up losing that game comfortably, which kind of does prove the point. Like you can't, T20, which I love as well, but that is clearly a format that lends itself to one player having an unbelievable performance. And I think some of the brutality of Test cricket actually is sometimes one player having an unbelievable performance is not enough. And I think that, Brian Lara, I think in 2001, he gets 600 runs in a 3-test series, and we're seeing he's still hammered 3-0 and lose, and that does show as well. You need everyone to pull together, and you need to be so adaptable. I think it's the variety of conditions I don't think there's any sport that within the confines of a game kind of allows it. I think it's kind of, some Test matches when, and the randomness of, when the clouds come in and that has a bearing, in the old days, rain would have a huge impact in terms of uncovered wickets and so on. So there's this kind of brutality mixing with this randomness as well, which means you have to overcome all these things. But I guess, yeah, it's sort of like if you were playing a tennis game and every set it switched to a different surface using a different Grand Slam. It is that brutality, and I suppose to be a master, right, you've got to be, people do say to be, a great player at the old school Wacker and a great player in Chennai, and then a great player at, say, at Leeds or Trent Bridge. I mean, those are three sort of different sports. There's such distinct skill sets that require. So to be, and that's why actually you see some of the most amazing players consistently have these anomalies where, well, they're not anomalies. They're actually part of what's so tough about it. Where in Asia or in England and New Zealand, they will have poor averages or whatever, and be brilliant elsewhere because the conditions are so varied, and then you have the kind of physical mental harder. I talked with Pat Cummins. He said they call it the niggle worm, which is when halfway through as a fast bowler, especially obviously, but halfway through a test match, when you're asleep at night, he basically said you kind of wake up and you're woken up by the part of you that is the most sore at that time, and then you turn around to protect that part, and then you wake up half an hour later, and then another part of you is the most sore part of you, and I think that does kind of capture it. And when I talk with Dale Steyn, I think he captured the spirit well of what it takes to be a great Test cricketer, especially a great bowler. He always said he wanted to be the guy who at 5:45 and deep into his third spell was still bowling actually as quick as he had done at the very start, if not even quicker. And he sort of says, I always looked at these guys who dropped 10 miles an hour over a day, and I thought, I don't want to be like them. And that's the kind of the bloody-mindedness, the madness, if you like, that it probably does require to be one of the greats.
You talk about different natures of pitches around Test cricket, making it a different sport. I've always thought that T20, ODIs, or the middle ground, and Tests, they're almost like different sports anyway. But if you've got different sports within the Test arena as well, and what people don't get, I think, what kind of the layman doesn't get with particularly Test cricket, is the nature of the pitches can have such a bearing on what happens, because somebody that comes just in off the street and thinks, well, he scored 100 yesterday, so he's a really good player, he must get another 100 today. Pitch could be completely different, and he's out for naught, and all of a sudden he's rubbish. It kind of doesn't work like that, does it? Yeah,
we haven't even talked about the heat. I mean, look at cricket. The Test cricket has probably been played in about 9 degrees in Chester Street in May, and it's probably been played in about 45 degrees at the Wacker. Again, I mean, so far removed from each other.
I remember going to Chesley Street for a very early county game, and there was an ice cream van parked in the middle of the biggest puddle you've ever seen. Everybody was wearing about 10 layers, and the ice cream van, fair play to him, he stayed about half an hour before he decided that this wasn't going to be his day. It can be very cold up there in the early season. You also, there is a quote as well. Test cricket has reflected wider social and political forces. It has also helped to shape those forces. And I always think, sport can have a really healing kind of element to it, can't it? It can be something. I mean, we talk about boycotts. I mean, Afghanistan women and all the rest of it at the moment, but the cricket can really bring people together, can't it? And it can solve some problems.
Yeah, it could. I guess I was where I think with cricket and I guess sport more broadly and politics, I think it's very, very good at shining a light on existing problems. It's not always as good at solving them. But I think, I suppose the two, well, I suppose there's a few in cricket that Test cricket you look at that did transcend, certainly have transcended the sport. I mean, the affair with Basil D'Oliveira, of course, and his incredible 158 over 1968, just an incredible, and the drama of that, he'd been dropped earlier in the summer after getting 87. And he was still dropped. Very, very, very strange. I went, part of my research, I went to the archives at Lord's, and they're meticulously kept. It's an incredibly unfortunate coincidence that the minutes of the selection meeting when he was dropped just aren't there. It's what are the odds of that? All part of the mystery, right? And so,
would conspiracy theories suggest that they've been lost? Yeah,
exactly. And in fact, you look at how desperate the South African government were to remain part of playing Test cricket, and I think that was because they thought that while they were a Test team, they could create the illusion with significant numbers of the white population that it wasn't that abnormal what's happening there. So that's why the boycott was so important there. In West Indies, the campaign, CLR James and plenty of others led for, an end to white caps as well. Actually, just captaincy on merit basis is what they wanted. They weren't anti-white captains per se, but they were pointing out how ludicrous it was that there'd never been a black captain with tenure, because George Headley done it in a one-off in 1948, but never been a black captain with tenure until 1960. Frank Warren, and obviously that was seen as being very important in the kind of wider push for Caribbean independence in the Caribbean islands. In fact, there's by the mid 60s, actually, a series of islands are independent. So there would be two, and actually with England as well, it's a bit more subtle, but the enduring nature of having an amateur captain was such a it did sort of shine a light on British society. But actually, CLR James was when Ian Hutton was appointed captain in 1952. So he was the first kind of first modern professional captain. So the first since 1887. CLR James was really thrilled, and because he actually saw a link between that process of appointed captain on merit and what wants to happen in West Indies, and so that was interesting seeing those links. But actually, one of the this is very much a book about stories to emphasize, but obviously one of the kind of very interesting statistical nuggets I found was that the first 10 tours of Australia that the MCC ran, so the first 10 Ashes tours, the total average by England captains in those games was an average of 22 with the bat and 34 with the ball, and didn't score a century at all in those 50 test matches, which basically says England were on average picking a captain for the Ashes who was not worth their place in the team, which is completely remarkable.
Yeah. I meant to ask you this at the start. I've written a few books, and when I've done it, I've been dead excited when I've had the idea. But halfway through it, I thought, why have I started doing this? It's just, and then when you get the book, it's exciting. But most people, when they write about cricket, they write about a player, or they write about an era, or they write about a subject matter within the wider thing. You've decided to take on the whole lot. Are you crazy?
Yeah, so this was born in slightly cursed circumstances in Sri Lanka in March 2020, when I went out for dinner with Simon Wilde, where we made a big mistake of going for a Chinese, and it turned out that was our only night in Sri Lanka before we had to go back the next day because of COVID. And we're talking about his very good history of England, his biography of England, which came out a couple of years prior to that. And I remember saying, someone should do this, but for global test cricket. And he was sort of like, I've got other stuff going on. And I was like, at that point, I was like, okay. And I just said, maybe I'll have a go. And then it's just a thing I said. And then I properly got into it mid-late 2021, and then submitted it, I guess, about 3 years after that. So sort of October-ish last year. And then actually, you kind of forget about it. And then sort of 6 months later, you see this, and it's, I think whatever else is inside the book, I think publishers have done a great job with the cover, which is lovely. So it's a bit surreal, but no, it was a real, I guess my ambition was really to there's a kind of selfish element actually in terms of kind of writing the book that I wanted to read that I kind of couldn't exactly find, which was just bringing everything together. And it's about the stories and moments that changed Test cricket, but it's narrative history really, and because I guess a lot of the history, there's a lot of great history out there, but a lot of it is focused on particular countries, and actually weaving everything together was and talking to tons of people, and I think I read over 300 books. It kind of got a bit out of hand at times, but actually I've tried to, and I hacked back obviously quite a lot to keep it, although it's a big book, there's plenty. I think Simon's book on England is a bit bigger, so it's hopefully a book that people will read. It's certainly intended to be read from cover to cover.
Just hold it up again and turn it sideways so we can see how thick it is. Yeah, so it's a pretty weighty tome, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's 150 years just about of Test cricket.
So that was originally kind of, I was aware that obviously the anniversary is in 2027, and that was kind of in my mind, but in the end, actually, it was fine in terms of yeah, actually, at one point I had a mad idea of having it out a year early, which was just bonkers. And I got a year's extension, which I was very happy with. And it means that, like I say, even if it's a bad book, it's the best bad book I could have written. So in that sense, it's a nice feeling.
It is a bit like doing something at school, isn't it? When you got deadlines and stuff, when you kind of, please have a little bit longer.
And there's an element we do something like this. Is like you don't. There's probably an element you don't so much finish as stop. Right? You have to stop somewhere, unless you become like Robert Caro spent 50 years writing his biographies of Lyndon Johnson, which I could have done for Test cricket, but I didn't quite fancy that.
I mean, I guess you put yourself in a good position because in 25 years' time, you can do another one that marks 175 years, and then if we're all still around when it's 200, then you can do that one.
Fingers crossed. It's a long way away.
You just actually used the phrase I was going to put in my next question, a mad idea. But that was when Test cricket was first played. It was described as a mad idea, wasn't it? And it's obviously turned out to be okay. But the thought of playing two countries against each other over 5 days and all the rest of all the kind of things that came into that was deemed to be a little bit crazy. But it's worked.
You have to get a boat for a month to get from one team to the other. There's a bit of an obstacle there.
Yeah, I always think that when you read the old stuff, and they spent so long on that ship, whereas now they just get on a plane and they're there 24 hours later at most.
I think the worst was the 2021 Ashes. They played. It was back-to-back Ashes, and England were absolutely obliterated in Australia. I think 5-0, and then they had to get the boat back with the Australians, and apparently even at kind of deck cricket they were getting hammered, and then they got hammered in the home Ashes as well. That must have been pretty demoralising. And I suppose they were about 10 months. These players were basically living with each other. They were seeing so much of each other, and that's the thing about Test. One of the things actually, which I got a real sense of interviewing people, is that these kind of friendships, but also just sheer respect that people have across national lines is really kind of amazing. And I see that with how. I don't think happens as much in other sports, but you get a lot of, especially with spinners, but you do get lots of secrets that are shared across, So Murali, actually, the Doosra, he got it from Saqlain Mushtaq, and he saw Saqlain bowl it, and they just talked to him afterwards. And I sort of talked to Saqlain. I was like, why did you tell? You had this great secret. Why did you tell him? And he's like, well, it's art really, and art should be shared with people. So it's amazing kind of attitude people have.
And they genuinely admire each other, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I always like that when you see a kind of seasoned pro that's coming towards the end, who's having a chat with some younger fellas on the edge of the boundary, and they're picking their brains, and they've probably plucked up the courage to go up and ask that person some questions, and it's really nice to see that being received properly and that knowledge being passed on, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think talking to players, I was really struck by. Well, I mean, I was kind of amazed by how many would talk to me, and I've played a game of picking a great 11 of players who I interviewed, which I can bore you with if you like. But I won't go on that. I think it's Langer, Dravid, Williamson, Tendulkar, number 5, very tricky. Ian Chappell, Jar Wardnell, Kevin Peterson, De Villiers 6, and then something like Ashwin 7, Cummins, Holding, Stain, Murali.
It's not a bad team.
Yeah, I've cheated a bit with having Dravid as an opener, but I think that's probably okay.
Yeah, that's a very good team. I always, people that watch the Cricket Badger podcast, listen to it, will be bored of me saying this, but I always think with the different formats, I compare them to TV and films. Like T20 is a bit like a TV advert. You get some really good TV adverts that live long in the memory, but most of them are pretty forgettable. You enjoy them probably while you watch them, but if you're asked about it 8 months later, probably not. You get kind of the ODI, the middle grounds is more like a TV drama, an hour-long thing going on, and some are good and some aren't. And they take a little bit more of an investment. But a test match is like what can be like a classic movie. The very best movies, because you've got that period, that you've got that length of time where things can build and things can change and people can dominate and then they can be tamed, and the story can be quite exciting, can't it? And then builds to hopefully a crescendo like we saw at Headingley in 2019 or something, where it finishes. Not all of them like this. There are some very bad test matches, but test match cricket, I think, has got the ability to entertain like no other, in my opinion.
And I think the history gives, like, certain talking to the players, you know, the reason why, you know, say India winning Australia was such in 2021, especially, was such a huge deal, was awareness of, you know, this is normal to win in Australia and so on. So that we talked about the brutality of it before, and that, so you have, because we talk about competitive bans, actually, there's a lack of, in some ways, there's a lack of competitive bans now, although you still see, but then the kind of paradox, I guess, is that makes Wassini's winning at the Gabba last year is such a great moment, because it should not happen. And if that's happening, if it's a 50-50 match, there's just, you know, that's the weird thing about Test cricket, that in a way that the bad Test matches are necessary for the good Test match, the great Test matches to live in the memory, right? Because it's the fact of having 4 innings in 5 days, and it is not designed to have, you know, a 1-wicket cliffhanger or whatever. So when you get those, it's like such investment to get there, and you're like, and there's awareness of, you've kind of seen something special in a way that, I do love T20, but, you know, a 5-run T20 game is not the same as a 5-run Test match game.
No.
Like it is so profoundly different.
And you can make a living in T20, a very good living in T20, by being able to hit 26 off 13 balls on a fairly regular basis.
Tim
If
Davis.
unless you're Zach Crawley, you don't make a living in Test cricket doing that, do you?
No, although I guess one of the things I loved about the book, actually, is the kind of randomness of kind of legends that are kind of actually just normal players who had a day in the sun. I mean, the best sub is Gilbert Jessup. I mean, he was basically often a specialist number 7 with an average of 21 for England, but he played innings that we're all still talking about, you know, the fastest ever century by England, 1902, in a one wicket win for England. So it's kind of this serendipity that, you know, that guy on that day just happens to play this unfathomable innings, and it's actually kind of more special than had it been by, you know, Jack Hobbs or whatever. It's an element of the unexpected. He was a very attacking player anyway, but he wasn't of the level that should be playing one of the best things of all time. And that kind of, you have that, which is lovely. It was Kusal Perera, his century for Sri Lanka when they won in South Africa in 2019, which is what, 153. That was from the kind of, I actually compare it to Jessup's in a way, because I think that was his only score above 70 against a team apart from Zimbabwe, and it's just like, wow, you've played maybe the best Test innings ever. Like, fair play. Yeah. And also, you're a legend forever. It's amazing.
I was going to say, the Gilbert Jessup, his name appears periodically whenever anybody does something, scores a fast century. His name appears on the graphic on the telly, doesn't it? He's there forever. Yeah,
I mean, he owes a lot to the Baz ballers, because he's always in the conversation now. He's more relevant now than he was for 120 years.
We're going to come back to Tim in just a second. I'm going to thank our new friends at CRICKETFROG again, and let's play this little advert from CRICKETFROG, and then we'll be back in just a second to hear more about Tim's book, Test Cricket: A History, by Tim Wigmore, the man on the screen alongside me today. I am padding because I'm trying to find the advert. Here it is, everybody.
We all want a bit of that first-class lifestyle, right?
Well, with CRICKETFROG, you can travel first class on trains for a lot less.
We're talking up to 60% off first-class tickets using our upgrade options.
Think eBay, but for train tickets.
Win your upgrade and you can enjoy food, drink, and a whole lot of legroom. We've got the alcohol.
It's beyond simple to sign up and start bidding. Just download CRICKETFROG and upgrade your ticket today.
There you go, CRICKETFROG.com, the place to be. You can get £5 off if you quote CRICKETFROG when you book your tickets with CRICKETFROG. I will keep that graphic going across the bottom of the screen. If you need to know, at CRICKETFROG.com, there's all the information there. They're a new sponsor of the Cricket Badger podcast. Tim Wigmore, my guest today, and it's I tweeted about having you on yesterday, and I said, I get so excited about Test cricket, and this conversation could probably last about 5 days. If we let it do it, but we probably need to kind of frame it at some stage. The Ashes, obviously, probably the most famous series. If India played Pakistan a little bit, that might become as big, probably bigger in terms of a global audience. But do we put too much store in the Ashes, Tim? Because we'll be playing Zimbabwe in a few weeks' time. and at Trent Bridge, and you can guarantee the Ashes will be mentioned throughout that test. This is good preparation for the Ashes. Sam Cook making his debut. Hopefully, this is a chance for him to shine with the Ashes coming up next winter, etc., etc. Yeah. It's Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe are pretty decent. There's still test runs and test wickets to be had. I think we talk about the Ashes too much.
Yeah, I wrote a piece last year in which I said England's disrespect for the World Test Championship was fitted within a history of English exceptionalism. Because like that's the example, early Test cricket, it didn't really, when England lost away from home, it didn't really count. So when England were losing these series in the Caribbean, particularly, there was a sense of it didn't really matter because they hadn't sent their full strength team, or even though it was almost full strength, but they'd built in an excuse in their original squad, which is why only when England lose at home in 1950 is it like, oh, we've actually lost. It's a very odd kind of attitude. And I think throughout history, I think there's an asymmetry here. Like Australia do care a lot about the Ashes, but I think England are more obsessed with the Ashes than Australia are. I don't think it's a huge deal in Australia, but I think it dominates the discourse more in England than it does in Australia. I mean, one reason is just because cricket is more popular in Australia, and there's an element of trying to bring the Ashes in sometimes artificially, to be honest, to try and draw interest from media. And I also think Australia just like we want to beat everyone, and of course we want to beat the Poms maybe particularly, but they don't kind of have that kind of weird distinction. And actually, look at the history is very interesting. So I think until the 1950s, England pay players more for Test matches when they're against Australia than when against other countries, for example. So it is a sense of not everything is equal. When Len Hutton in 1938, he breaks the world record score, which is held by Wally Hammond at the time. But no one mentions that at all. So because Hammond was against New Zealand and 1933, and literally going back to newspaper reports at the time, no one was mentioning that at all. It only mentioned that he'd broken Don Bradman's record in 1930. So it was a sense of it was kind of, it didn't really count if it wasn't the Ashes. But that is also partly at that point because there was this confusion about what a Test match actually was. And this is why I find it quite funny and very strange, very, very cricket actually, when people talk about the sanctity of statistics and we need to have different categories for day-night Test matches or 4-day Test matches. Well, England used to play, like 1926, which was, a big Ashes victory for England. It was 4 3-day matches, one of which saw hardly any play at all, and then a timeless test. Well, it's like, how are these apples and oranges? That's always built in. And actually, going back to the question, Australia, I think just have a little bit, they kind of respect other countries a little bit more on average, and slightly have, they're a bit more level-headed. And England love to look to a series 2 years away. And sometimes I think that's as a kind of defensive mechanism, because if you're losing a series against, Pakistan or South Africa, then one way to kind of stop talking about that is saying we're really just focusing on something a few years away.
Yeah, I do think it is a little bit disrespectful when the likes of Zimbabwe play England. Not that we've played Zimbabwe for, I don't know how long is it since we played Zimbabwe? It's
in a Test match, 2003. It was James Anderson's debut.
Wow. Yeah. Jimmy Anderson and Anthony McGrath, didn't they? They made their debut in the same match. I mean, having said that about the Ashes, there have been some rather incredible Ashes moments, series, tests, which I imagine feature quite heavily in the book. Don Bradman's records and that team that he brought over here. Those moments at Headingley mainly, aren't they? He says as up here in Yorkshire.
Bradman at Headingley is just ridiculous. 2 triple centuries. It's like not even your home country. It's just absolutely extraordinary.
In England, though, I obviously used to work for Yorkshire Cricket, and I wrote a piece for the magazine about Yorkshire Headingley's impact on the Ashes. Mark Butcher's innings. Ben Stokes 2019, which was after I wrote the piece. There's been so many good Test matches, England, Australia at Headingley. It's remarkable. But I say we talk too much about it. But when I was a little kid, my ambition was to captain England in an Ashes and win the Ashes. So it is important, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course the history. The history does build so much into it, and that just grows and grows and grows. And I think one of the challenges for Test cricket is to develop that history in other series. I think India Australia now is, well, in fact, India Australia this century has been the best series actually by quite a long way. And we saw, I think there were record breaking crowds in Australia for that last Australia v India series. So that's that, and to a lesser extent India v England are kind of on a par.
That's one of my favorite series. That India B team almost that beat Australia, and the time before last, wasn't it? That was just an incredible series with Rishabh Pant doing his stuff and everything. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I interviewed Rahane, who was captain for the last 3. Yeah, because he was a great, unbelievable story in terms of, he'd run out Virat Kohli in the first match, then they'd been brought up for 36, then Kohli had gone home. And Rahane had to pick this team up, and he scores an unbelievable century at Melbourne in terms of given where in India were. And I think that they are missing 8-9 players by the final test at the Gabba. And they just... they were able to pull together, and it's a kind of, that to me was such a historic moment, not just because of what they'd achieved, but also represented it. It showed that the depth of Indian cricket and how, even with so many players absent, India was able to be a really formidable side. And looking at the history of Test cricket, it seems so incredible how bad India were for so long. And one of the kind of lovely nuggets I found in the book was Sachin Tendulkar's first 44 away Test matches. India only win a single one, so one win in 44. And I interviewed Tendulkar. He did talk about an element of kind of frustration at his teammates, because there's just he was doing so much and there wasn't enough support, and it was a very odd thing. I mean, there's this quite kind of sad story about Barbados 1997. So India need 120 to win. I think they're 2 for none after day 2, after day 3, and Tendulkar goes to a restaurant on the cliffs, on the sea, and he asks the waiter for a bottle of champagne. He says, can you chill that? I'll be make sure it's perfectly chilled. I'll be back tomorrow to drink it. Next day, Tendulkar gets out for 4. India bowled out for 81. Very, very sort of traumatic collapse and defeat. Tendulkar stays in his room for 2 whole days. He's completely devastated, and that shows how brutal Test cricket is, because India clearly had dominated that Test almost until the end, but suddenly to get 120 against Ambrose and Walsh, and actually all that history is making it harder, right? Because they weren't just pacing the West Indies 11 players; they were like, no one wins here, and that always makes it harder and harder, and also makes those moments when you can overcome all that so special.
Is that bottle of champagne still in that fridge? Did he ever go back?
I don't think he did. No, I mean, that would be a good collector's item. Of course, there's still a famous bottle of champagne that Tendulkar got in 1990 at Old Trafford when he was player of the match, and he got a bottle of champagne, and he wasn't allowed to drink it because he was too young. Yeah,
the conversations at a restaurant. Did he say he's coming back? He's a
man of his word. Yeah, what could possibly have gone wrong? I don't understand.
I mean, let's talk about India. Actually, let's talk about West Indies first, because West Indies, in my youth, West Indies were just incredible. I mean, I used to it was a love-hate kind of thing for me, because I used to love them coming over because they were brilliant to watch. But I always knew England were going to lose and be, get absolutely battered by them. Yeah. That transformation that happened with West Indies cricket, suddenly getting the fast bowlers, Tony Gregg's comments, etc. That's a book in itself, isn't it? That's 5 books in itself. But the West Indies golden era was just beautiful.
Yeah, I think looking at the history, not to disagree with you at all, but one of the things that we forget, West Indies in the 60s was such a fantastic side as well. So they win in England. Well, they win in England in 50, but they win again in 63 and 66.
Well, they did have a fellow called Garfield Sobers, didn't they? He was rather good, yeah.
In summer, when he gets sort of 700 runs at 100 and he gets 27 wickets, and it's just like, this is a cheat code. And there's a lovely quote from J.M. Priestley, who's I feel like I spent all summer on the TV. It's always, Sobers causing England great harm in an unexpected way. But how incredible this guy is. And so it seems, they're very strong in bits, and obviously then from 76 they are unbelievable for 19 years, and then Actually, I was looking at that and I was trying to say, what all these great players, but what were the sort of changes? And one of the big things that people forget is West Indies until the mid 70s, they didn't pick players from outside their big four. So Andy Roberts, one of the first, he was obviously from Antigua, and he said there was a lot of players before me who were better than me from Antigua, but they weren't being selected. So one of the things that West Indies start to do, they start to pick their side more on merit. And then this is a kind of common theme in Test cricket. It's amazing how often teams are not picked. Teams are not the best 11 players from that side who could be picked. And that's what West Indies start to do that a lot better, and that's a big factor. And then you obviously have World Series cricket is a huge, and I think West Indies are the most professional cricketers in the world at that time in terms of they have a combination of World Series cricket. They are so sought after in county cricket, and also the difference between West Indies in county cricket and English players in county cricket, which people always say, oh, well, English players were obviously in county cricket. Yes, they were, but the competition to have one of those overseas slots was so tough, and that was a coveted position. It wasn't the competition was not to retain your contract as a kind of average English player, but to be one of those West Indians who was good enough. And at one point there was sort of, they were well over 100, there were hundreds of West Indians playing in English league cricket as well. So there's an incredible network, which meant they were able to play all year round. Had Dennis Waite, who was a fitness trainer, who actually I talked to Michael Holding and Andy Roberts. They all did say this guy, he was so important in making us so professional, and that's of course because to bowl fast, that's the thing, to maintain their pace and hostility, they needed to all be so fit, and we look at the team actually, it's striking. I know people talk about over it, but striking actually, they didn't really have a genuine all-rounder at all. It was an old school kind of test team of 6 batters, Jeffrey Dugan, the wicketkeeper at 7, and then the four best bowlers, but they obviously didn't normally have a spinner.
One of my favourite players, because I watched a lot of cricket at Kent when I was young, Eldine Ashworth Elderdine Baptiste. He was a genuine all-rounder, but he didn't play as much.
He played.
Yeah, I mean, you know when you get your favourites, when you're watching your own team, and you're kind of thinking, I want him to play, and Baptiste was an incredible player, but he didn't play anywhere near as much as he could have done.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Sylvester Clarke. I mean, there's
he was just evil, Sylvester Clarke.
Yeah. Franklin Stevenson, who didn't play a Test match, obviously maybe in part because of being the rebel tour to South Africa, but I think actually the fact that they could send. Even the West Indies Rebels did kind of show their strength, because that was West Indies B/C team, and they're the only ones who won one of those Rebel tours. And the reason those guys were so ripe to be picked off was because they were such outstanding players and they were so underpaid. And Clive Lloyd, in fact, he warned of it a few years earlier that unless there was some form of central contracting, there was a real risk that this was going to happen. Obviously, he was proved right.
West Indies then had their downfall. Australia came in and were dominant, but it's turning into the India show now, isn't it? And I kind of just wondered, do you make any conclusions in the book as to the future of Test cricket? Is it viable? Can it continue? Are India going to carry the torch, or are they going to be too dominant? Is the IPL going to end up being played for 8 months and we'll play Test cricket for 2 weeks of the year in November or something? How do you see it?
So I think one of the great things, the really worthwhile things about looking at the history of Test cricket is you really see people have worried about this game the whole time. Before, in the so-called golden age, before World War I, people were terrified about it. Just doesn't fit into the modern lifestyles. People won't sit and watch all day. These are the debates they keep reoccurring. Obviously, they have a different flavour and different specifics, but they do keep reoccurring. And obviously, a lot of people thought World Series cricket actually would be the death of Test cricket. Not just when it came, but actually they thought it would just mark a complete onset of one-day cricket being everything. And that hasn't happened. And the reason Test cricket has endured is it's such a strange, wacky, but also a brilliant game as well. And the history, of course, adds, in a way, every year history that Test cricket survives actually makes it hard to kill off because, players have more respect for it and everything. Which is not this is to say it hasn't got big challenges. So for me, I think this is a minority English view, but I think the World Test Championship is actually so important. You need to have, New Zealand winning the first World Test Championship was a perfect example of why, because that is actually possibly the best day in New Zealand men's cricket history. And it's a huge, when I talked to Kate Williamson and Ross Taylor, it was like, they thought it was the same as winning the World Cup that they almost won at Lord's 2 years earlier. That was how seriously that they took that. And if you care about Test cricket, you need to give every team the chance to have that moment. You can't just say, oh, hard luck. If you don't happen to be from Australia, England, or India, you don't get to play in these marquee series. So that's why, for me, fixing that is so important. And what I do propose I actually think, for me, if the trade-off, when New Zealand are playing South Africa or Pakistan, I think it's much better for Test cricket if that is 3 tests of 4 days each than 2 tests of 5 matches each, of 5 days each. And I think we need to be, saying, oh, it has to rain. Firstly, if you look at the history, of course, it hasn't always been 5 days. It's the last 6-day test, I think, was in 79. There was rest days until the 90s. So it has always changed. And for me, we have to be kind of honest about those trade-offs rather than saying, oh, 5 days or nothing. Actually, I would say the World Test Championship, for me, even if you have to have this weird thing of having only 6 series because of the India-Pakistan situation, but you can still make it work. And actually, lots of American sports have a weird imbalance. The Champions League group stages now have a weird imbalance. I don't think that is the end of the world at all, to be honest. So if everyone is playing 6 series in the World Test Championship of 3 tests each, that's 18 tests over 2 years. So that's 9 tests for every country year, which is actually enough for West Indies and Sri Lanka, to actually enough to develop your players, to have experience of it. And also then brings advantage of when West Indies come to England and they've got the pressure of playing the kind of new experience of a 3rd test back to back. They've actually had more experience of that, because that's a huge toll, obviously, particularly for fast bowlers, also for batsmen if they're under the cosh against a particular bowler. So yeah, for me, I would say, can we make sure we have that? And I think you can fit in 9 4-day tests a year. You can actually fit that into probably 3 blocks of 3.5 weeks or something. So literally like 2.5 months, 3 months. Yeah, it's not really a huge amount of time, and it's perfectly compatible with a 3-month IPL, to be honest. So for me, that's what I would be looking to do, and I would potentially say, I think there's a magic we haven't really had it in the history, but I think there's a magic to knockout to Test cricket. I'd be saying, I would like the winner of the group stage to go to the final and maybe have a second v3 match that happens a week before or so. And actually that also creates more context for the final. If England have just beaten South Africa to get to the final, that actually adds to the final, whatever. And you've got to share the wealth more as well, which is, cricket is richer than ever before. So there is clearly enough money to make things work. It requires, better. We've been talking about Test Cricket Fund for a long time, but nothing has really happened. Most people know about India's share. Also, I'm not actually sure why England needs to get more than, say, South Africa, to be honest, as well. So it's not, it's easy to just blame India, but there's a bit more going on. But I think there's a way. I think for me, Windows is the way, because I suppose so Australia's attitude for a while was, their dream was, people would watch the Boxing Day or New Year's test in the day and then watch Big Bash at night, which is a great model for them. But if West Indies players are playing in the Big Bash, they're not playing for West Indies, and that kind of that's when interest in Test cricket goes down and stuff. So for me, you had 3 winners of Test cricket a year, each series World Test Championship, 3 times 4. For me, that's the way to go. And then you just say the Ashes and England, India, and Australia, India, you can just play 2 matches afterwards, which have their own context. And no one's not going to care about the Ashes because it's not part of the World Test Championship, but you can make people care about, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, because it is part of the World Test Championship. People understand it. And also, of course, by doing this, every series the same length, then you just have a simple point system. How about 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw? Keep it so simple. No horrible percentages of points contested that make your head hurt.
I mean, you had me until you said simple point system for the World Test Championship, because that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Because nobody understands it. Not even Ben Stokes understands it. I mean, if England actually took it seriously, probably more English people would actually care about it. But because England are never in the hunt for it.
Yeah, England have talked it down so much. It was actually, I think, in terms of being the country that we like to say that cares about Test cricket the most, I actually don't think that's very responsible to talk down the thing that actually, for you want to get to a point where South Africans are, say, whatever, they're going to delay their international retirement and play for longer because they think this cycle they've got a chance of winning the Test Championship. If you tell people it doesn't matter, that's not helpful. You also, like last summer in England, that that summer should kind of have been framed around England need to the race for the World Test Championship, the race for Lords. Really, which is a decent narrative rather than it's Ash's prep, and B, we're just going to moan about the overrates and say how unfair it is.
Yeah, do your job, as Roy Keane would say. It's your job to bowl your overs. Why does the World Test Championship have to be over on a 2-year cycle when the Test cycle is 4 years? I don't get that. Because I mean, we see the Football World Cup's 4-year cycle. You know, it's only down to money, isn't it? They want that showpiece every 2 years rather than every 4 years. But if you actually had the cycle over 4 years, then everybody could play each other home and away, pretty much. You could maybe play 5 Test Ashes series, but only count the first 3 or the last 3 for the World Test Championship to give the 5th Test maybe some sense of importance if it was a one-sided series. 4 years would give a lot more time to actually fit everything in and actually make it a little bit more obvious to. I think one of the problems with it, people don't see how it's working. People don't understand how it's working, so therefore don't get excited by it. But having said that, India are massively excited, New Zealand are massively excited, Australia are massively excited. If you want to understand it, you can, can't you? But why 2 years or not 4?
I just think there's no. The World Cup is different. The World Cup is a self-contained event. There's actually there's no real precedent for fans keeping just over 2 years. So 4 is a bit part in the sky. And what you want with a Test Championship,
the kind of Test cycle is 4 yearly, isn't it?
That's arbitrary. Also, there's no way everyone could play everyone home and away over a 4-year cycle because you didn't play 6 series over 2 years. So there'd then be 12 over 4 years, so which wouldn't solve the problem. And you don't want West Indies to be knocked out and have 3 years of kind of dead matches.
Yeah.
You want a system which actually, and by having 3 teams get to the final, you want West Indies to think, oh, we've had this great win at the Gabba. We've now got some home match we're going to win all of. We've got a path, and that actually makes it more exciting and it gives more countries a path. And I know we like to sneer at South Africa and say they didn't deserve to get to the World Test final, and they have won 7 tests in a row, which is quite a decent achievement.
Points make prizes. They got more points. The final question, or the final topic for discussion here, I'm going to give. I mean, when I have players on, I give them a time machine and say you can take it any way you want to. If I gave you, Tim Wigmore, a time machine, it's just arrived outside your door. You can take it backwards. You can go and revisit any series or test that has been in your lifetime or before that, or you could take it forwards to see what happens with Test cricket. Where would you go?
Can I pick more than one?
Yes. I'll give you up to 3 destinations.
I mean, so I think that for me, my favorite Test innings, and it was incredible to talk to him about it and get a blow-by-blow account, is Brian Lara's 153 against Australia in 1999. And he talked to me about how basically at 5 a.m. that morning he visualized the whole innings, and it's really incredible in terms of he was thinking about because Australia had 2 leg spinners, and he was basically thinking, I'm going to get through the first hour against their pace bowls, and then when the leg spinners come on, I'm going to really attack them, and then trying to make them bring back their fast balls before they're ready. And the fact there's all this history, and he'd almost been sacked as captain at a Test before, and he got double century, which was another incredible innings, which he almost rates high in terms of the personal pressure he was under. But I think that one for 5-3, I mean, to chase down, I think 308, he gets half the runs himself, which in a 4th innings chase against that quality of attack is quite remarkable. And there is actually some great YouTube footage, but that was incredible to talk with Brian Lara and break down that innings. And I think that is a fair claim to being the best test innings of all time. And also, I mean, that match is incredible. Australia got 490, which it was into a 98 for 6 in response. So no right to win that. And you have the incredible, the kind of pride of Ambrose and Walsh and just how phenomenal they are. That does something very, very special. And it's a great moment at the end and this is also part of what I think Test cricket is, in a weird way, is so special, is when you have Brian Lara, he's kind of coaching with Courtney Walsh, and he's coaching Walsh on how to face Glenn McGrath, because there you have, McGrath and Lara, 2 of the best players of all time at what they did, and you had Courtney Walsh, the batsman, probably one of the worst players at what he did. And I do love that about Test cricket, and that's the kind of underdog story. Even for a great side, they will have
guys who bat at 10-11 who are not, who are pretty poor, you know, might be actually almost club level in genuinely, which is remarkable to think. So you have that kind of connection. So the R153 is up there for me. And I do think, you know, 1902 Ashes, you basically have in consecutive matches, you have Victor Trumper getting a century before lunch, and which is the first ever time it's happened. It's only happened 5 times since. So it's still such an, you know, unbelievable feat. And then you have the Jefferson innings, the following test, and you have Australia win the first by 3 runs, England the second by 1 wicket. So you have, and you have, that is kind of the golden age incarnate, really. So that's such an incredible thing. Although that series is, it's very cricket actually. So it's a perfect series, but it's not really, because we need to switch the tests around. Because when Australia win the 4th test by 3 runs, they've won the Ashes then. Whereas England then win, England then 2-0 down. So if you'd flip the matches around, had Jeff's match before Trumpers, and then it would have been a 3-run win to seal the Ashes. So it's kind of very cricket, and I think that's kind of, we talked about why those moments are so, because you need everything to fall into place. And when it does, it is really, really, really special. And I think, I do think we've got over 2,500 games, and I think. Yeah, all those records. And sometimes I think cricket slightly drowns in records, but there is, when you just get to the ones that kind of really, really matter about, you know, winning in Australia, winning in India, those sorts of things, you do get a sense of kind of how special it is, and there is a sense, I think, that players kind of know they are standing on the shoulders of the people who've gone before them as well. And that's a lovely part of Test cricket. And you do see that in terms of how players, you know, get counsel from you know, guys who are a generation older and things, and I guess even things like, you know, these honours boards and stuff. It is all a sense of being all part of something bigger than an individual match, and I think that's part of what sets Test cricket apart.
We'll send you back to see Brian Lara. We'll send you back to. We'll probably have to buy you a suit and a big overcoat and a hat and a little moustache or something, won't we, for the 1902 to kind of blend into the crowd. I love that when you see the old pictures and they're all wearing their Sunday best almost, and then the old team photographs when everybody's got the hair kind of brill green back, and they all look about 58 when they're actually 22. I just love that stuff. Would you be tempted to take then, after seeing those 2 things, to then maybe have a little bit of a sneak ahead and see what's happening in 20 years' time?
Yeah, so I think there will be some. It'll still be happening in 20 years' time. In that sense, I'm optimistic, because I mean the history of Test cricket is people fretting about this weird thing being about to be extinct, which isn't extinct yet. But as I said, I think the risk is Test cricket retrenches into being played by 3 or, you know, maybe more recently sort of 5 or 6-ish countries, and it kind of hollows out to the point of we just had the kind of big 3 series being almost like a Ryder Cup or something, being these huge events that are kind of enormous for the rest of the cricket cycle. But I don't think that has to happen, but it does need good administration, and there's enough money. You know, you go to a Shakespeare or whatever, and commercial theatre is sort of subsidising that, and people kind of all understand that, and that's okay. And it should be, if you go to T20, a little bit of you is subsidising Test cricket. I think I do think one of the issues that, and I think that's the reason I think that's okay, and it's not kind of just people would say, well, give the fans what they want, but actually, if you talk to people, there's so many people who really love Test cricket, who are so happy it's around, who really follow it, who actually might not even go to a game a year, might go to a 1 day a year, whatever. So they actually don't give that much money to it, but they really still value it so much. They might go to multi-20s because their lives is busy and it's easier for them to go in an evening or whatever. But they still want this weird thing to exist. And hopefully administrators are among that group.
So I can't remember who it was now. It's only a couple of days ago. So I've got a goldfish memory. But somebody was saying that these people that have just kind of myopically looking at first-class cricket, myopically looking at T20, they don't know what they're missing on the other side. It was around the 14-year-old Indians century in the IPL. If you go forward 20 years, you might see his final test. It could be beautiful. But yeah, I do agree with that, because I although I am a one of a better phrase, a purist, and I love the tradition.
The way you used your hands. Yeah.
I love the tradition and stuff, but I really like T20 as well. I like the IPL, and I can see what's attractive with that. And I can see what's attractive with the other side of things as well. And yeah, forever can they maybe just go along together, I hope, and help each other. But anyway, Tim, hold your book up. Tell everybody where they can get it. Tell everybody why they should buy it.
this was 5 years in the making. Put a huge amount into it, and it's got some lovely photos. Even if the words aren't very good, I think if you like cricket, you'll enjoy it, and I think it will look lovely on your bookshelves as well. And it's not, to emphasize, this is not a stats book. This is a book about characters, about stories, about matches, about personalities, and it was a lot of fun writing it. Difficult, but a huge amount of fun, and hopefully it's fun to read as well.
I like books that size, because if you've got a shelf that hasn't got any ends on, you can put one of those big weighty things on the end of it, and it keeps everything else in order, doesn't it? So even if it's just for that, go out and buy it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Test Cricket, A History by Tim Wigmore, who has been my guest on the Cricket Badger podcast. And although we haven't met before, it's been lovely to have a chat with you today. We could have carried on forever on Test Cricket. There is so much of it. It's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. And go out and buy Tim's book, Test Cricket, A History. And thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks so much, James. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Do it over a beer sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. I am now going to try and find. In fact, I think if I end stream, it plays the end credits. So we'll find out in a second, won't we? Because they just changed the thing I use, and it's a little bit more confusing than it used to be. Thank you to CRICKETFROG.com. They are the new sponsors of the Cricket Badger podcast. If you quote Cricket Frog when you book on CRICKETFROG.com, you can get yourself £5 off when you book your train tickets. You can even upgrade to first class. They've saved people loads of money. See if you can save some yourself and get that £5. I'm almost giving you £5 here. I couldn't be more generous. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thanks to Tim again, and I'll see you again soon.